Hello and welcome to the 28th episode of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
And we are talking about political philosophy in the early modern era of philosophy. And of course, we are reading Anthony Kenny's book, A New History of Western Philosophy. This is the 9th chapter of the 3rd section. So, there's one more section, or one more chapter in this section, or in this book, and then we move on to the modern era.
That's the last section.
That is the last section.
Yeah,
so we're almost at 75%.
We are at the 28th week, and I've finally figured out a comfortable way to sit and participate in this. I'm in a Papasan chair with a microphone right in front of me. It's great.
Yeah, you look very, very comfortable.
Yes, I am very comfortable. You know, if we once we get my new recliner in, I think we'll have to move this to the basement.
That's fantastic.
And then I'll fall asleep mid-episode.
Yeah. Sounds of him snoring halfway through.
So what do you want to talk about your thoughts about the political philosophy espoused by these philosophers now, or do you want to wait till the end?
We always wait till the end. We wait till
I always
the end
ask you
to do the
beginning.
recap. We do the recap at the end. Doesn't make any sense to do the recap at the beginning.
Well, it's a prelude. I don't know. You want to give a foreshadowing of your thoughts
Well,
about.
I really liked this chapter. It's very interesting.
You say that every chapter.
Well, I find it very interesting.
You say it every chapter.
It's always interesting.
Yeah. All right. This was by far my favorite chapter so far.
Out of the whole book?
Of the whole book. By far. Like, by a multiple of 10.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Should we start off with Machiavelli?
I'm kind of bored already. Let's move on. Yes. Machiavelli. Brilliant philosopher. Mm-hmm. Thinker, whatever you want to say.
Yes.
Realist, maybe. Despicable, soulless creature.
Yeah, it's really how it's, Machiavelli's usually kind of simplified, is usually ends justify the means. That's kind of his prevailing philosophy. Right. So in his Prince, that's his big book where he kind of describes all of his opinions about philosophy. He kind of describes what a prince should actually do in charge of a state, of a people. And he says that always the life and the freedom of one's country take full priority over basically anything else, over comfort, over happiness. Freedom and security of the state must be ensured before anything else comes first. Yeah,
and I don't know that was, unique to him, mm-hmm. but the way he went about describing it and how his philosophy seems to be that the state and the ruler are one and the same.
Yes.
So the interests of the ruler are the interests of the state, mm-hmm. and therefore the ruler should do whatever is necessary to protect the state, which is the ruler. It's very, very convenient for the ruler, not so convenient for everybody in his path.
Yeah.
Because there's even a quote from Cicero there, the welfare of the people is the highest law.
Yeah.
Of course, devil's in the details, as they say. And with Machiavelli, pretty much all of it is the devil.
Kind of how you were saying about anyone who stands in his way. Machiavelli really talks about this, and he says to take over a state, you have to basically completely eradicate any memory of that state existing before.
Well, that's only true if it was a free state and self-governing. Mm-hmm. So if it had an autocracy before the prince comes in, then you're just taking over the existing system. Mm-hmm. But if they have any knowledge or memory of free people, of being a free people and having representative government, you got to kill them all and you got to wipe out the memory of the old ways, or else there's always going to be pockets of resistance. Mm-hmm. And I would have to say that I don't disagree with everything Machiavelli says. Yeah. It's like he's right on how to get things done, mm-hmm. but it doesn't seem, it's not a moral code.
Yeah.
It seems to me like a practical philosophy, very mm-hmm. similar to, what's his name? That they always say that Obama followed, I've got his book. He dedicated to Satan, to Lucifer.
Oh, I don't know. You've talked about this before.
Oh, come on.
The name.
I'll think of it mid-episode.
So you'll interrupt me here in a few minutes.
Huh?
You'll interrupt me here in a few minutes.
Yes. All right, go ahead. Start explaining more in detail Machiavelli while I remember or look up the guy that I can't think of his name.
And so a lot of also what Machiavelli kind of believed in is that, the ruler can be feared without also being hated. He did believe in, certain rights of the people, that those are necessary, particularly if he respects property, and especially if the ruler only kills when it is absolutely necessary, so with justification.
Saul Alinsky.
Rules
for Radicals.
So completely peaked the mic. It's going to sound terrible.
You predicted it.
Yes, I absolutely did. It's like
Rules for Radicals. I haven't gotten through it.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those like a dozen books that I have that I have started reading and that I haven't finished. I will finish that someday.
Good for you.
I'm sorry. Where were we at?
I was talking about Machiavelli, about how a ruler can be feared but not hated, if he respects property and also only kills with justification and evident cause.
And I like how he says, for men will sooner forget the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony. So I think there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah. It's kind of scary that if you take away all their lands and all their property, they'll be more vengeful for longer than if you just kill their dad.
Yeah.
There's a lot of truth to that. But yeah, so you doesn't want to just have his idea is not to be just completely hated by everybody because you can be feared without being hated. Anyway, go ahead.
Yes, and so then he also says that really the prince here can kind of use his words to make himself almost seem better than he actually is, because the words will always speak louder than the actions, because if he passes a law that only affects some people, you can kind of cover that up by saying, oh, this is great for everybody, and the people that are actually affected by it are much fewer in number than the people who hear his words.
Do you see any parallels to modern American government?
Yes, I do.
I mean, it's like reading a campaign strategy playbook for modern American politics.
And I really like the quote here from Machiavelli. He says that anyone who has a mind to deceive will have no trouble finding people who are willing to be deceived.
Well, that's the truth.
So basically, if you want to deceive somebody, you're going to, right? You'll find somebody gullible enough to believe you no matter what.
I think that's why televangelists are so successful. There's a market,
Very much so. Anything else you want to say about Machiavelli?
Oh, I can talk about him for hours. Well, what do you have to say about him?
I think it's very brutal, very cynical, I think, a lot of his political reasoning. Does Kenny really say if this is kind of like a guide or if it's more of just kind of an observation? Yeah,
I think, and that's the question. I don't know that he's advocating for it, but maybe he is a little bit. But I think it's more of a description of how you do it.
Yeah,
and which is dangerous in and of itself. But that's the question. But I think Machiavelli is 100% right on as far as what happens, not what should happen or the way it should be run, but that's just the way politics work. Yeah. And like the big thing I thought, like you said, which is so true, that if you pass a law that like 100 out of 1,000,000, it crushes them. As long as you lie to the other people, they're like, oh, that's a good idea. And it takes a lot of leadership for the opponents to focus on minority rights. That's why they have the Bill of Rights and all that kind of stuff. And that's why we have the constitutional republic that we do, is because it's so easy to get the masses to ignore the minority suffering.
Majority rule with minority rights.
Right.
All right, moving on to More's Utopia.
Yeah, this is a bunch of hogwash.
Yeah, this was interesting, but very impractical, I think. So Thomas More really wrote this big, long, almost novel, sort of, where this man, travels the world, and he travels to this place called Utopia, and he comes back to England and describes, how this perfect society basically functions.
I believe I took an entire semester course in utopian thought.
Really?
I know, so I studied a lot of it.
To say about this.
Yeah, it's all utopian theories are complete and total BS. And this one, it's important from a historical perspective, but I think what we all commonly view of as utopia, like that theory, which is like rose-colored glasses view of the human condition and human nature. Is necessary to come up with a utopian system. It's interesting because there's so many thinkers that have published what they believe would be the utopian society. Well, even Plato's Republic in some ways is a utopia. But everybody, it seems like they always want it to be. They're basing it on the assumption that men are generally good. Men and women are generally good, and that's why it's a utopia. The utopia political thought is just completely impractical. Machiavelli is much more practical, even if you're trying to fight it. It's just to understand, okay, this is what a despot, what a ruler does, what every politician in Washington, D.C. does every day is Machiavelli. Yeah. I mean, that's what's happening.
Mm-hmm. I think the one really good thing that did come from Thomas More's is talking about, the punishment for stealing, because this was a big issue in England at the time, that, if you were caught stealing, you'd be put to death, basically. That was the punishment.
Right.
And he kind of says, it's very unjust to suffer loss of life for loss of money, because, if it's the same punishment for stealing that it is for murder, then that basically incentivizes the criminals to just kill the witnesses.
Oh, absolutely.
Why wouldn't you?
That's right.
If you're getting the same punishment anyway.
That's right. And that's why I think it's the counter argument in that sense is in favor of the death penalty, or a complementary argument for the death penalty, that there has to be a bigger punishment for the most reprehensible murders, which one of the aggravators in Missouri is to kill a witness, because you have to have something above and beyond. Because if you kill one person and you get the maximum punishment, why wouldn't you kill the 5 witnesses too?
Yeah.
There's got to be some aggravator there, but I mean, it doesn't have to be. I mean, we can always just say, no, just add them up, and it's you get 5 free murders for one murder. And that's really what most systems in the United States have. Like Washington, Massachusetts doesn't have the death penalty. So if you kill one person, you end up getting the same punishment as you kill 30. Mm-hmm. Oh, I got 5 life sentences. Well, I guess they don't enforce it in reincarnation.
Yeah. Yep.
So you still just do the one life.
Mm-hmm. So going back to the utopia, when Morris kind of describing how this actually works, one of the first big things is that there's no private property. Mm-hmm. Everything is accessible to everybody, because basically these people in this society have kind of evolved almost past the need to possess things themselves. They all share equally, more or less.
Did you introduce this as, like, he sets it up like it's a dialogue between 2 guys and this traveler, and the traveler had gone to Brazil and been abandoned, I think, and then came all the way back via India. And so we went to all these different lands and ended up in seeing this land utopia. And I suspect that it's more of a commentary rather than a prescription for what can actually be. Mm-hmm. It seems to be like some of it's just ridiculous, like that private property thing. I mean, it's communist thought, and it's just so completely impractical. It's almost like a commentary on what doesn't work. But
yeah. And then he also kind of says that, every single citizen in utopia has to work. Basically, everybody learns a trade, and they only work 6 hours a day because, when you have the women working, because he kind of does commentate on kind of the situation in modern society when you have so many people just not working, that they can take up the slack from those, cut hours of the day. Because,
right.
It's much less than the 8-hour workday or more that they were working in England at the present time.
Well, and he was writing it at a time where there was a lot of lords and that, where they were just inherited wealth, and they just lived a life of leisure. And although I think his math doesn't work out because there's so many working poor versus the number of what did he call them? Drones that just kind of lived off the labor of others. But I mean, it was kind of revolutionary to say 6 hours. Now we have the 8-hour day. This is before they had those regulations. So it was common to have 12, 16-hour days as routine.
Oftentimes the people that worked for you just lived with you too.
Yeah.
As just servants or just people to work on your land.
Right.
Basically.
24 hours. Yeah, that's right. So then go ahead. Sorry. I'm talking too much.
And then another big part of this utopia is kind of this justification for war in this society. And a lot of that is, he says, really the biggest reason to wage a war is to take land from somebody else if they aren't using it to the fullest extent, basically. If they just have this property and you want that for your own utopian society, you can have that because they're not using it to the extent that it should be used. That's kind of where he goes into his talk about, there's a maximum amount of people that should be in a city because at some point it becomes unproductive, and that's when you build a new city. And if there's no room for new cities, it's your moral obligation to go out and conquer new land if those people aren't using it the way that it's meant to be used.
Right. Well, it used to be, the westward expansion in the United States was for the more productive use, what they perceived as more productive use of land. What's that? The destiny term, my gosh, I'm having a hard time remembering the terms I'm thinking of off the top of my head. But that it's basically the destiny for us to populate the land. Manifest destiny. Yes. Thank you very much. And we don't have that now. And I think our country is, well, I guess in some ways is better because at some point you run out of land. But, it seems like maybe we should have turned left and gone down through Mexico too, but although we did that to a large extent, that's how we got Arizona, New Mexico, and California, but and Texas to a lesser degree.
Yep.
But without that expansion, it's like there's no, we lose that as a people that kind of like go out west and make a name for yourself, start over and get so many acres and.
Well, eventually it'll be space, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's more likely it will invade somebody else.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't make sense that for the last 50 years, well, since World War II, well, really before World War II, really from World War I, we've had wars, but we never kept any of the land. Now, we ended up, I guess, after World War II, we took over kind of like the management, well, of course, of Japan and Germany, but that was basically turned over to them. But there were some colonies that became, they weren't colonies in the United States, but they were...
The Pacific? Is that what you're talking about?
The
islands,
right. And so, I guess protectorates, I'm trying to think. Gosh, I'm having a hard time with my vocabulary today. But really, since Mexican-American War... Spanish-American War, we haven't really taken over and kept, like we invaded Afghanistan. We've been there for 20 years. We're just going to walk out and leave. Yeah. Same thing with Iraq. And I mean, I'm not advocating for war for territory, but if we're going to go to war, we should just keep it. Why not?
I think there's a much bigger belief in kind of the sovereignty of nations at this point, that every nation has the right to exist, because that's in the UN Charter, basically. So if you enter into the UN, you have to kind of come to the agreement that every nation has its own right to exist, if it follows these certain rules, of course.
I disagree with that.
Really?
I mean, do you think like... I think, like, we'll get into this later, the political philosophy about the right of the rulers to rule, which is basically the people have provided them with the authority to have a just society, and I don't understand why the argument against us taking over the government of some foreign country when the government is corrupt and killing its own people, like North Korea. There are practical arguments, and I'm not advocating for war, so just we're clear on that. But what's the moral or philosophical argument against us deposing the regime in North Korea and taking over that country? There's no moral argument against it. There's practical reasons not to do it, but they have no right to rule that country. They have no moral or political right to murder people and keep them in internment camps. Same thing for communist China. I mean, the Communist Party, why do they have the power to lord over all these people? They're a minority in that they haven't been elected to anything. They're just sheer brute force. So there's no moral reason why we can't go in there and kill all, maybe 10% of the leaders. And
I guess the only moral argument I can think of is that we would be doing the same thing in deposing them, using our own brute force to take out the brute force. Well, but then afterwards,
it depends on how you're gonna manage it. Then you can get the consent of the governed, in a managed way where we keep the property. Yeah. But then they're part of we. We expand. Yeah. In theory, what's wrong with that? Yeah. I don't see anything wrong. I mean, in theory, morally, but I'm not saying we should go to war with China, but I'm not saying we shouldn't.
Just one last bit about More's utopia. He kind of talks about the religion for a little bit, and he says that they all kind of follow this religion to a sort of unknown God, but they do tolerate other religions kind of to an extent.
Yes,
and that they tolerated this Christian who came into their country, but then executed him, was it, for like kind of inciting violence, I guess was kind of the moral reasoning there.
Yeah, he was banished, I thought.
Oh, banished.
I don't think they executed him.
But he was banished because, he was preaching, about how they were all going to hell or something. Right. And so he's inciting violence. He's, corrupting the masses, I guess you could say.
Sedition.
Yeah, so it's not the sin of being a Christian, it's the sin of, starting violence.
Yes.
The reasoning behind that. And they also had elected priests.
Yes.
Which I don't think that's how that should work at all.
No, I don't think so. They got to come up with something. My favorite part of the description was that apart from family law, utopians have few laws and no lawyers. Their lawyers are stated simply enough to need no interpretation, and they think it better that a man should plead his own case and tell the same story to the judge that he would tell his own attorney. It's just so idealistic, and that'd be great, but it's not practical.
It's impossible to have so simple of laws.
And I'm not saying that we need to have as many lawyers as we have now, but lawyers serve their purpose in protecting the innocent. There's a lot of people. He comes from a point of view that like everybody's equal in intelligence and education and work ethic. And if you're not, everybody's going to work. Okay, what if they don't?
Yeah.
And what if they don't? Some won't. Then what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. And then what if you have somebody who's really not very articulate and is kind of dumb and is accused of something? Is that person really able to mount a defense or handle a civil issue with somebody else, a criminal or civil issue, without somebody helping them out?
Well, this is a lot of the same reason, because one of the debate topics, Lincoln Douglas debate topics this past year, was about the federal work guarantee, federal jobs guarantee. And that's kind of the same argument, Some people are just going to refuse to work. Can you still employ them? It's also kind of a moral argument. If you have a murder, you have a criminal. Are you obligated to give them a job if that goes against your own moral beliefs and that sort of things? It's how would that actually work practically? Yeah, and
when you look at it, it's just like present day America. They have a big unemployment problem because there's the COVID appropriations gave $300 additional benefits for unemployment. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the entry-level positions, they can't fill them because people are getting the same or more money for not working than they would for working. And they're choosing just to stay basically leeching off everybody else.
Well, it's kind of the same argument for, not having the crime or the punishment for stealing be, the death penalty. If you're getting the same punishment, why not do the bigger crime? But if you're getting the same reward, why not do the lesser work?
Right.
It's that sort of argument.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's interesting in a theoretical discussion, and interesting to show what not to do. I mean, all utopian thought is foolish and impractical.
I agree. Moving on to just and unjust wars. Mm-hmm. So this is Francisco Suarez, who was a Jesuit. And he kind of outlines, what actually constitutes a just war. When can a nation go to war morally? He says there's three conditions. The war must be declared by a lawful authority. There must be a just cause, and they must use proper means and proportion to carry out the war. So basically, the individual does not have the right to, punish somebody else. You kind of have to go to that higher authority to declare war on some other higher authority. There has to be a reasonable cause, and he kind of goes into those reasonable causes. And of course, there's the right to defend oneself, and then an offensive war is acceptable to rectify a grave injustice to you or to your allies. And there must also be a good chance of victory if you enter into a war, because if you're just prolonging violence with no seeming end, that it's just not a just war at all.
Gotta have an exit strategy.
Mm-hmm. And then with the proper means and proportions, there's always got to be that opportunity for the enemy to always first rectify the evil before you go to war with them. And then you must also just, not target innocent people is basically what the just means.
I would tend to agree with all that except for the proper means and proportion. If he means proportionality in use of force against them. But I think what you just alluded to is proportion, meaning you can't target civilians. Mm-hmm. But I have this argument about Israel and their various wars. There's always an argument that it has to be proportional response to whoever attacks them or whatever the case may be. And if my view is, if you're going to be conducting a war, I don't know that any of them are just. Some are better than others, but it involves killing people. Mm-hmm. And the best thing to do is end it as quickly as possible, which means use disproportionate force, overwhelming force to end it. Mm-hmm. But if you can.
Well, he's pretty brutal in his judgment of who is innocent and who isn't. He says
anybody who can.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. He says, well, women, children, of course, and then those who physically cannot fight. Of course, those are the innocent people. But he says, the direct quote is, human judgment looks upon those able to take up arms as having actually done so.
Yep.
So if you're in a war and you see somebody who is capable of fighting against you, it is morally okay to just kill them, which is pretty brutal.
Yeah, what's really interesting is how well democracies do in war against more autocratic governments. I mean, historically, they're usually slow to get going, and they make a lot of mistakes early on, but then they correct it, and then bam, they wipe out their enemies.
Well, a lot of it's they actually have the people's support. The people actually fighting for them are, have that kind of moral incentive too. And it's not just you're being forced to do this for the man upstairs. You're
not just a conscript, you're part of the republic. In theory, yeah.
Moving on to Hobbes.
On
chaos and sovereignty. So he really believed that the human's natural state, if we didn't have governments, that we would just all live in permanent warfare. And he believed that the prime task of philosophy is to justify the consent of individuals to live in peaceful subjection to the government.
Yeah, right.
So
right.
He's saying basically, we're all kind of just chaotic people. And so it's my job to say, why we should consent to actually being controlled, or not so much controlled, but give up some of our own natural rights to freedom, a higher authority.
Yeah, I like how I think the best argument that he makes for this is the example, like where he says here on 7:13, let the reader consider that when taking a journey, he arms himself and seeks to go well accompanied. When going to sleep, he locks his doors. When even in his house, he locks his chests. And this when he knows there be laws and public officers, which means everybody on some level understands that the state of nature can be brutal. You're always supposed to be wary and protect yourselves from dangers. The big thing on police departments now is a 9 p.m. routine. Lock your cars and remove the valuables from the cars. Been much more effective if they actually caught the criminals and put them in jail. But because why should I have to lock my vehicle if I don't want to? But whatever. But I think that's his best argument about the state of nature of man. I think he goes a couple steps too far, talking about you have to that we're at constant war, and I don't think that's true. I think we are a social people, so we tend to form in groups. So it's not like it's not every man for himself. It's never been every man for himself in world history. It would always be like us versus them.
Yeah. And so a lot of what Hobbes's kind of political philosophy is very much based on these social contracts. All governments, all kind of authorities have to be in this covenant between the people and the government. The people have to actually agree to this thing. They have to kind of follow, we are in turn following their rules, but they also have to follow our rules for us to kind of instate them as the power.
What do you think of that?
I think that's very good.
Yeah. Do you think it's true?
I think it's true that that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you think that's the way it is?
Not necessarily. I don't think. I think there's a lot less of the government asking us for our permission than there is for us asking for the government's permission.
That's the truth.
But I think he does take this a little bit too far, because when he's talking about these contracts, he says that men must transfer all rights except self-defense to a central body to enforce peace.
Right.
And I think that's too far. We don't have to, subject all of our rights to that degree, because I think we do have more rights that should be protected by the government than just self-defense.
Right.
So it shouldn't be everything or nothing, basically.
Right. I agree with that.
And then kind of his last point is that, if this sovereign state fails to, fulfill their end of the agreement, to keep peace, to keep security, to keep prosperity, then there is an obligation, there's a moral application for the citizens to resist them, to rebel and instate a new government. And I think that's very important.
Hard part is finding that line.
Yeah.
It's a real hard part.
Moving on to Spinoza.
Spumoni,
yes. Spinoza's political determinism. So he had kind of a similar philosophy to Hobbes. He said that men must make an agreement to be guided by reason and repress their harmful desires.
Isn't Spinoza the determinist?
Yes.
And he's talking about freedom and all this other stuff in his political philosophy?
Yes, which is strange.
Yes.
Because he really believed that, this agreement is kind of common between all men, is that we have to agree together to kind of repress these bad urges and to be guided by reason, of course. And he said that these agreements must always be advantageous. And so if this agreement between me and somebody else, if it's not to my advantage, then I have that complete right to not be part of that agreement anymore. And that's kind of what he applies to the government. The government is an agreement between us and them, and if the agreement on their end is not advantageous to me anymore, then I have that right to cut off that agreement and make a new government, basically.
Yeah, I don't really think too much of this, although I did like this, that he says it always leads to trouble if the clergy are given political power.
Yes.
Boy, that's the truth. And, our church is way too into civil affairs and a number of different things. They just don't have the knowledge or wisdom or inspiration to even talk about such things. But such is life in the big city. Everything's political.
Yes. Moving on to Locke.
Yeah,
There's not too much to say about Spinoza's very short section.
Interesting. Locke's the man.
Locke on civil government. So he believed that men are by nature free and equal. So this is kind of the very opposite end of Hobbes. Where Hobbes believed we're completely chaotic. He believed that if we're left to our natural state, we're pretty free. We're equal among ourselves, and that kind of these governments, these people in power, are the deviation from the norm inherently. And he also believed that we definitely have this natural right to life, liberty, and property. So that is something that should never be taken away from us. That I definitely agree. And of course, he had a lot of influence on the founding fathers.
Sure enough.
With life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and the Declaration of Independence.
I think Hobbes had influence on him too about the fallen nature of man. Because I think the division of government and all that kind of stuff. I think there's some in there too.
And so what Anthony Kenny kind of says about Locke's opinions on property, basically, he says it's very ingenious the way he kind of defines what is one's own property.
Right.
Because he breaks it down into terms of labor. So if the things that I produce by the fruits of my labor, that is inherently just mine, because my labor is very clearly my own. And so then our possessions really kind of go as far as our labor produces them. But he also kind of says that we shouldn't have possessions in excess.
Right.
We shouldn't have more than we can use. I shouldn't have more land than I can cultivate and make better. So there should be kind of a limit based on how much we actually have in order for us to be kind of producing the most amount possible.
And it was important at the time because there's so many landowners that had the property tied up and they weren't using it productively. And it's really kind of the inspiration behind the legal principle that's widely used, even locally here, is adverse possession. So if I'm out on some 10 acres of property out in rural Missouri and I'm using it for my purposes adversely to the owner for 10 consecutive years, I own it. All I got to do is file a quiet title petition and get the judge to say I own it, and I never paid for it or anything. So if you just have property out somewhere and you're not paying attention to it, somebody can go out there, squat on it, and you let them do it for 10 years. It's theirs.
I mean, you've had a lot of cases like that, haven't you? People building fences or building, roads or something.
The fences and the roads issue is a whole different thing. Neighbor disputes are worse than divorces. They're more dangerous, I think. They're crazy people. Bunch of FU contests. But we don't need to go through that. Yes, but no, the adverse possession is interesting. So if you did, and I think it's useful because it makes you monitor your property and use it, or your neighbor or just somebody, random person, can go out there and get some productivity out of it. And what right do you have to own it indefinitely? So if you're never going to go out there.
If you haven't noticed that something's
for 10
been
years.
built there for 10 years.
Now, they can't do it in hiding. They can't hide behind a shack. They have to do it open and notorious. And if you go out there and say, get off my property, then they say, F you, it's my property. Well, that's adverse and all that. But if you don't chase them off, you chase them off and then come back, well, then the 10 years has to start over again, which makes sense. But it's similar to, back then, early American history and English history, especially, they had all these inherited property or land grants from the government or the king or whatever the case be. I got thousands of acres. They never did anything with it. It's just locked up.
Yep.
So
with that, when Locke's kind of defining, what the government should actually do, he says that men must give up some natural liberty in exchange for comfort, safety, and peace. So that's kind of what all civil society should do for us. Those are the three big things,
right?
While also still protecting our rights. And then he also set up kind of this separation of powers, which he thought was very, very important.
Right.
Because there should be a legislature that makes laws for the common good, and then there should be an executive power that enforces them. They should never be one and the same. Because if the same person enforcing the law is also making them, then, well, it's just a whole lot of power for one group of people.
Because they're just going to make the law to enforce it, That's it's so dangerous.
He makes a really big deal about this consent of the governed. So how do you know if you're actually, agreeing to this contract between you and the government? And he kind of says, well, if you are enjoying kind of the benefits of the society, then you are implicitly consenting to be governed in this way. I never wrote, a contract between me and the government agreeing to follow all these laws. But if, I'm enjoying the things that they're providing for me, this peace and everything, then at some level I am consenting to follow their end of the contract as well.
Right. Yep.
He also said that laws must be equal for all, designed for the good of the people, and there should also be no taxation without consent. So those were his big three things in the construction of laws. Yeah.
Well, there are. I mean, a lot of protections in the United States. It's just frustrating sometimes.
And he also said that rebellion is justified if the government acts not for the common good. So if the common good is not being protected, then you have that right to rebel against them.
They should tell those people complaining about the January 6th riot. Just joking.
Yes. Anything you'd like to add about Locke?
No. These, all that's good stuff and needed to be said. Yeah, he said it and inspired the founders and the greatest nation that's ever been created. I mean, we're the closest thing to a utopia that's ever existed. Period. So? I mean, it's so close. I mean, it can always be better, but it is the best system ever designed by man, bar none, not even close to any other system, including other countries that are in existence right now.
What makes you say that?
Because the protections on individual rights and liberties, especially religious liberty and free speech, there's always a push to erode it. But no other country has that system of where the founding document, the empowering document, the Constitution, limits the role of the government explicitly. There's a process, and of course, it's really hard to get anything done on purpose because the nature of our government, with the checks and balances, so to speak. But then the Bill of Rights and the amendments to the Constitution, I think the things that are hurting us now is that they tinkered with the election of senators, so that there's direct election. So they're similar to just big Congress people, representatives, as opposed to elected by the state legislature. There's a huge mistake, and it's caused problems from the beginning of that amendment. That's a problem. And the lack of respect for the 10th Amendment, which is specifically states that anything that any of the powers that are not enumerated in the Constitution are reserved to the states. And I think we'd be a lot better off if that was enforced by our Supreme Court and our political leaders, because that's really the heart of the problems that we're running into with the management of this country. There's too much centralized power, too much corruption in Washington, and there's just too much power there, and that's a real danger. And those two things need to be corrected, or they will be either corrected, or we won't have the same country that we have now.
It's a little bleak.
It depends on my day. I think it'll be. I'm still optimistic that it'll be a correction. And I'm not terribly optimistic about the direct election of senators because people think, well, I need to have a vote in that. But the fact of the matter is, none of us, like in the state of Missouri, which is not the largest state, I've seen one of my senators once in person.
Really?
And I was involved in politics, and so I was at a breakfast thing where he gave a speech. That's it. I've never laid eyes on Hawley. I've seen Blunt once, never exchanged words with him. However, if they were elected by the legislature, the state legislature, like the founders originally had it, there are two things go on with that. Number one, our state legislator, ours is Becky Ruth, who lives in Crystal, and our state senator is Paul Wieland, who his daughter went to Pius. You've met him, right? And Becky Ruth, if I really needed to, I can get a hold of her. I'll see her at the grocery store or something. I don't really know her. She probably knows who I am, and I know who she is. But if we really need to track her down because our senator was going crazy, we could track her down and say, hey, that idiot that you appointed senator, U.S. senator, is screwing everything up. Why don't you do something about that when he comes back up in 6 years? And they will, and they did. And there's of course there was a lot of corruption back there where they had dueling factions. And that's a problem.
And there's also kind of a two-sided coin there where they would know that senator better than we would ever know them.
Correct.
So that can also go for they can speak more for their character, but that can also go adversely. They know them better. There might be some friendship there, some sort of
sort of back deal and corruption. That's why they changed it.
Yeah.
Because the typically the smoke filled rooms where all these politicos are selecting our senators, but it's corrupt now. But there's no control over them. Because they're all super wealthy. They're all multimillionaires. And they just get richer when they're up there, which doesn't make any sense because they are only making a salary now. How are they making all this money? Well, it's all a bunch of shakedowns and corruption, and they're all horrible. They're all horrible. And there's only so much. So that has to change in order for us to have long-term health as a country. But there's no accountability with any of these U.S. senators, and you have to have so much money to run a statewide campaign. You don't have to have any money to be selected by the state legislature. You can be some schmuck farmer from, Ironton, Missouri. Yeah. But if you get to know enough state senators and state representatives, so if you're in the state senate or state representative, or you're a county commissioner or something, and you're a good person and do a good job, they can appoint you the U.S. senator. You don't have to raise any money. You don't have to do all the things that are the necessary evil of becoming a senator. And then you're one of 100 people that are making the laws for our country. There's no small town farmer in the United States that can become a United States senator. It's just not possible.
That's the money you need to reach to
Correct.
Everybody in the state.
Right. I mean, to run ads and all that stuff, and you just get buried. Yeah. You just get buried, and that's how our system is set up now. And I think we should, and that's one of those progressive reforms under Woodrow Wilson, the worst president in the history of the United States, horrible racist jackass, wannabe tyrant.
Yeah,
that's one of the reforms that were put in by the progressives. We all know how offensive the progressives are in every way, in modern current politics. Yes. I completely went off on a random rant there, but
this is very interesting. That's great.
But that's a big thing to reform our Senate. We have to get that done, and the 10th Amendment. And I'm not like states' writers where we can't have any federal government, but we need to. I quite frankly, I think we need to move the capital. We ought to return Washington D.C. to Maryland. They want to have state representation. Well, welcome back to the state of Maryland, and because it was carved out of the other states, and they ought to make the capital like Kansas City, Missouri, or Kansas City, Kansas, where central part of the country,
Kirksville, Missouri,
wherever. Just like Jefferson City, Missouri, which is. Well, probably shouldn't say bad things about. I shouldn't say it's the armpit of the state of Missouri. But I mean, I don't know anybody there that lives there. I'm sure they're all great people, but it's an inconvenient place, and it's not a vogue place to live, And so I think we ought to put it like in North Dakota, where the winters are long and cold, and you don't want to be there. We need to get back to where. Being a representative, a congressman or a senator is a burden.
It shouldn't be a celebrity.
It should not be a job, a career. It should not be a career. And I think if we put that capital, because it was built in a swamp.
Well, they should have the framework of your favorite president, Polk.
Yes.
Where you should just go in, get what you want to get done, and then get out.
That's right. The one term, second best president we've had. Washington was, of course, the best. Yes. The only guy in the history of the world that I know of that was on top, could be king, and literally walked away to go back on his farm.
Yep.
I mean, amazing. He could have been a world leader, ruler, king. Handed that king, like he could have become a king. I think we're in our infancy. He was so popular. I think he could have taken over. He could have pushed through reforms, so to speak, and changed that presidency so it was because there were a lot of monarchists still. I mean, they had a king. It wasn't a foreign concept to them, and he was a good guy. And for him to walk away, he's got to be the best president. I don't care what else he did.
So a lot of times, even like kind of to bring it back to the philosophy, a lot of these guys don't object to monarchies at all, as long as they are good monarchies,
a benign monarchy.
And so that's what they would see in Washington. He's a benign monarch. But that would just pave the way for whoever comes after him, to just corrupt things.
Well, and he would have been corrupted.
Yes.
And I think he recognized that he did 2 terms. He's like, okay, I gotta get away. Mm-hmm. And you don't see that very often. Him and Dave Chappelle are like the only people that walked away on the top. Do you know Dave Chappelle?
The name's familiar. Yeah.
Dave Chappelle show.
Yes.
You gotta watch some of his stuff. He's brilliant comedian. Walked away from a hit show.
Moving on to Montesquieu on law to get back to our reading here. So he kind of believed that really kind of the spirit of a society, the character of a society is expressed in its laws. So how you can actually tell, what actually the opinion of the people is, that's represented in its laws. And he believed that there were, 3 types of government, and they all had one sort of virtue that kind of goes along with them. So if you have a Republican government, then kind of the virtue, everybody should be striving to be virtuous, to be kind of good people. Then if you have a monarchy, everyone should be striving to be honorable. And then if you have a despotism, everyone should be striving to be fearful, which is very true. So basically, in the republic, that's kind of I wouldn't say the best society, because he doesn't even believe that would be the best society, a full republic, but that's where the people are just striving to be good citizens, civic duty, participating in society. If you're in a monarchy, you should have a lot of pride in your country and a lot of pride in your government. Mm-hmm. You should trust them to do the right thing for your own honor, for your country's honor. And then despotism, you're just afraid of your leader, basically. Right. And that's what the government is trying to make you do in a despotism.
Yeah, it's interesting. He was a big believer in the separation of powers as a bulwark for individual rights against the tyranny. I mean, and I think they recognized, that you need you have to have those competing interests, so that you don't have one faction or one person take over. You need to have these competing forces fight against each other for us, for our attention and our support.
He believed that, there is no one perfect government. He said that really the government should be fitted to the climate, to the wealth, and the character of the people. So really what's best for one group of people is not the best for another.
Yeah,
Do you think that's true?
I think it's impractical to have a republic such as we have without a culture that supports it. Mm-hmm. There has to be a certain level of individual respect for individual rights, value for education, and a work ethic. Yeah, and that's what was really interesting and unique about the United States when it was first formed. Mm-hmm. And I suspect it's slipping a little on the education. I don't mean formal education, because I'm not a big believer anymore of higher education, the colleges and universities. Yeah. I think I think the education of most people going to college today is a net negative.
Maybe not like education is the right word anymore. Maybe just like awareness.
Correct.
Of what you should be doing. What is the right thing to do?
Yeah. Well, I think people have to know history. Like our founders knew how to speak. Most of them knew how to read Greek and Latin. Yeah. And had read Cicero.
Well, it's just a lot of them were very passionate about getting people educated. I just read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, actually. Right. I was telling you earlier today, he did so much for just the people of Philadelphia. He started the first library in the country, actually.
That's right.
And so
first public library.
Yes, first public library. And so they were all very, very dedicated to just getting information out to people in general.
Right. Big believers of an educated... educated working class and poor people.
Well, that's exactly.
It was revolutionary at the time.
Farmer's Almanac.
Correct.
Within that, there's the common knowledge of what to do for your farm, that sort of thing. But then he'd also just stick in snippets of just like philosophical readings and stuff to get the people just educated on what they should be doing, that sort of thing.
And I think there's a natural thirst for that. So getting back to the original question, I think if you have a bunch of illiterate peasants, it's hard. Mm-hmm. I think it's really hard because you have to, and I think we have now too many people that are functional illiterates, meaning that nobody reads, not nobody, too many people don't read books or magazines. I mean, they don't, print stuff doesn't exist, but even in the digital format, people just don't have any historical knowledge. Mm-hmm. Some people don't to put things in perspective, and so they're easily swayed with what sounds like good ideas. Mm-hmm. But when you read into it and you think about it, and it's been tried before, it's like, wait a second, that sure sounds like a lot like what. Like socialism, like they tried that in Soviet Union, and they killed a lot of people. The Humidor, then Homidor, or however you pronounce it. With this mass starvation of Ukraine, and well, wait a second. What about Pol Pot and those guys? Yeah. And even like the racial stuff that's going on now, it's like, do they forget about the Tutsis and Hutus in Rwanda? Mm-hmm. Do they forget about the Balkans? where they had like these three little countries that
the French Revolution.
The French Revolution. Well, the class warfare, the French Revolution, and it's like our Catholic Church forgets about the French Revolution, how they killed nuns and priests. And there was actually a parade just last week, a demonstration of priests marching through Paris to commemorate the murder of a bunch of nuns in the French Revolution. Huh. Do you know guess what happened to those priests that had that parade? Guess what happened to them in France just this last week? They got the shit kicked out of them.
Did they?
Yes. Yeah, they got beat up because they were anti-revolutionaries, and they're Catholic. Yeah. But they were just aghast that they were getting beat up by these thugs because they were out there commemorating the murder of nuns, back in the 1700s. Yeah. And so it's I think you have to have some ingredients. And so I think he's right in the sense you have to have a government that works for the culture and the society that you have. We tried to impose something upon Iraq, which seemed to work for a little while, but without our forces there, I don't know. It's hard to know how you can have a representative democracy, a republic, without a middle class, an educated middle class.
And so much with the issue with the education, especially online, like you were saying, is we do have all this information on our phones,
right?
But so much of it is driven, especially in the media, is driven by what do people want to click on,
right?
Or do they just read the headlines? Do they actually read the full article? Do they read the snippet of the quote from some famous person,
right?
Or do they read the full quote to give context? Basically,
right.
It's such an issue. So many things have been blown way out of proportion, or people just get the completely wrong idea about things because they don't actually read the full thing,
right?
Or the thing itself is just intentionally misleading.
Well, and if you don't read books or longer articles, and it could be ebooks, if you don't have an encyclopedia of knowledge, you don't know this headline doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. You don't have that instant. That's stupid. Mm-hmm. That an educated person is going to have, and it's important to have the right education, meaning that you have to know the facts of history and not the politicized version that's being taught everywhere now. Mm-hmm. But so now I'm going to get my Eeyore on, and we're all going to hell, and it's going to be war, and better buy guns and ammunition, because they're coming for you, and got to make sure you kill enough of them so that dissuade them from doing it again.
Right.
Under Rousseau
and the general will.
The inspiration behind the French Revolution and the various slaughters of innocent and guilty alike.
Mm-hmm. So Rousseau very much believed that social institutions, these governments, really liberate rather than enslave. They always kind of bring the people to a higher level, because in nature, men really only follow these simple animal desires. And so when you have a social institution, you're basically assuming that they always have your best interests in mind, which is very, very dangerous. Mm-hmm. As he said that every citizen in kind of this general will, which is kind of this consent to this agreement almost to, we all have our own best interests in mind, therefore all of our interests together must be the best interest overall.
Right.
And so he said that, with that, if we vote for one thing, and then the majority wins over us, then we kind of just have to assume that is the right thing.
The right thing.
Even if we think it's completely wrong, then, but the majority of the people voted for it, so it must be the right thing. And like you said, that's a very dangerous line of thinking, because that's what led to the French Revolution. Yeah. And Kenny even kind of points out that Napoleon was one of these people that really embraced Rousseau, and the people even kind of following Napoleon.
I don't know that he embraced Rousseau. I think he embraced power.
Yes.
And which I guess maybe he didn't embrace Rousseau because then he's the government. They should just do what he wants. But he was an autocrat, and he came in after the chaos of the French Revolution and the wars and the murders, and they just needed a strong hand. Or at least that's what they thought. Mm-hmm. And I really like that quote, from Napoleon. Who can tell, he asked as he approached death, whether the world would be a better place if Rousseau and I had never lived. Yeah. And I mean, somebody would have come up with Rousseau's philosophy, whether it was him or somebody else. I would think whether there would have been as much death without Napoleon, probably not, man. I mean, he had battles where tens of thousands of people died. Yeah. In essentially hand-to-hand combat. I mean, it's just rivers of blood.
Well, this whole line of thinking really goes back to what we were saying earlier with majority rule with minority rights. If you're completely following Rousseau here, you don't have those minority rights.
Correct.
You're just assuming that whatever the majority does is the best because that's the majority, and you have to submit to that, and that's so dangerous. Tyranny
of the majority, man. It's more dangerous. I would rather live in a monarchy than a complete democracy.
Yeah. Well, he even believed that these direct democracies are not the best way to go. He was in favor of an elected aristocracy, where it's basically we vote for our favorite rich people, essentially, and they decide what is best for us.
Yes,
which is
pretty much what we're doing now.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say the same thing. The amount of money needed to run for anything.
Yep. Yeah, they're all rich up there.
Moving on to Hegel on the nation state.
Yes.
So Hegel, kind of going back a couple episodes ago, was the one who kind of believed that societies are naturally advancing forward in kind of technology and morals, and that we kind of have to put our trust in whatever nation we're in to kind of take us on the right path. This very strong nationalism. And he said that these civil societies expand freedom by giving wider scope to the possibilities of action. So basically, if we're living in a just government, they're not restricting us at all. They're just giving us more opportunity to act within our own society. And his whole idea of the world spirit, that's kind of what I was talking about.
The Weltgeist.
Yes. How, how we naturally advance, certain nations naturally advance towards a higher morality. That's the world spirit kind of advancing. He believed that the world spirit is shown in the culture, religion, and philosophy of the people, which is in turn fostered by the government. He believed that, like I was saying earlier, the state is a platform for higher purposes. And then he also kind of goes into this really brutal line of thinking about how war has very positive values because it makes us think about the kind of vanity of material things and how we shouldn't always treasure that, which is true, I guess, but...
Right, so it's a high price to pay for that lesson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so a lot of Hegel's thinking is very, I wouldn't say similar to Rousseau's, but... it's very much along those same lines, putting your trust into the majority or whoever is ruling over you, because especially if you believe as he does, the nation is the guide to the higher morality.
They seem complementary, don't they? Like in a chorus, like they're in the same, what do you call that? Notes in a line. Octave? I don't know.
Same chord?
Yes, there you go. Chord? Thank you.
Okay.
So help me out, man.
Yes.
Yeah, and Kenny's thinking that Hegel's philosophy helped fuel the German high opinion of themselves and their manifest destiny to conquer all of Europe, which they almost did twice.
Yeah. Which I think is
very close.
I think it's very true of this line of thinking. If you're putting all your faith, the nation has what's in my best interests. Our nation is the best. I think that does get to a lot of dangerous places.
A lot of that us versus them type of thing. Yes. And if we win the war, then we were just in fighting it because we decided to do it.
Sorry. Well, that was it for that reading.
Well, what are your thoughts? What's your favorite part of it?
My favorite
you
philosopher?
Let me talk a lot. Yes. Or, philosopher of this group.
I would say Locke is by far the best out of all of these. Very much the individual rights, restrict the government, power to the people.
Power to the people.
But not a direct democracy.
Yeah, that's just horrible.
Because, we do not want to be Rousseau.
I'd rather have a tyrant than direct democracy.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Because at least the tyrant is going to be consistent in and of himself.
That's true.
The direct democracy, even like in Athens, I forget which war they were in. The people, I guess it was probably maybe the Peloponnesian War. I can't remember, but they voted in their assembly that they had defeated this enemy. They voted to exterminate all the people on that island, save like some small number. And then the next day they thought better of it, and so they voted to overturn that and only kill like a representative group. And so they had to send a trireme, one of those boats, to speed up and try to catch the first one, so that the second order rescinded the first order before they killed all these people, because they're just fickle. We're fickle. I'm fickle. Like if I think about an issue and I decide like emotionally, I may change my mind the next day or in a week, and that's the benefit of having elections only every 2 years or every 4 years. So you think long and hard about that vote. You're supposed to.
It kind of goes back to the same thing about education, especially with these physical books. You're thinking long and hard. You're not just glancing at a headline. You're not just looking at the bare minimum.
Right. Yeah, you got to get that context. I think the lack of knowledge of history is a real problem.
People just aren't interested anymore, which is a shame.
Well, they could be. I think there's just a lack of effort, and I blame our public schools.
You think so?
Because if you let's see, do I want to go down this path? The schools of education are too easy.
You think so?
I know so.
What makes you say that?
Because they graduate really stupid people that don't know anything, and those people become well-paid, tenured instructors in elementary school. And really what we need are, what is more interesting? A novel by a popular writer, or what really happened in the French Revolution? How can you not enthrall an audience about all the crap that went down during the French Revolution? It's fascinating.
Yeah.
They cut off the king's freaking head, and then they cut off his wife's head with a guillotine. How is that not a fascinating subject? How do you not interest people in that? And that's just the gory stuff. But world history is so fascinating. Ben Franklin's life. How could you not keep any aged group of people interested in that subject?
Yeah.
But you have to have it in the curriculum. You have to say, okay, we're going to teach American history, and you have to have somebody that, number one, knows it, and number two, can articulate it.
Yeah.
And we don't have either one of those now. They want to talk about, racism and all this bullshit. Pardon my language. It's all important and all that kind of stuff. But if you don't understand the history of it, you don't understand why Christopher Columbus was celebrated when he was celebrated. Why did they erect statues for this guy? It's not because they're a bunch of racists and they hate black people or indigenous people or whatever. It's because of the bringing of the Europeans to this continent, which are their ancestors of the people that built the statues. And I'm going to say one last thing that's going to offend people, and that's, everybody forgets that the Native Americans were illiterate peasants who didn't have running water, for crying out loud. They didn't have plumbing. They didn't have a written language for the most part. And they were nomadic people that were at war with each other for centuries before we got here. It's not like there was some idealistic... They just didn't populate the land like we have once we got here, being because I'm white. But Americans populated it because they weren't successful at it. Because they didn't have a society that would pass down the information from one generation to the next. They had no written word. They were living the same life.
There were very few civilizations much further south than here.
Yeah, and you know how brutal those were? Yes, they had human sacrifice by the thousands. And we're supposed to respect them? F that. Yeah. The people in modern day Mexico are better off under the society that's there now, which is not great either, than under the Aztecs or the Incas down south. Those people were horrible, horrible.
Yes,
but somehow Christopher Columbus is terrible. They put up a statute in California for the I forget which god it was that they actually had human sacrifice too. They put they replaced. It was some some Jesuit, I think. I have to look it up, but don't quote me on it. But I know they replaced some offensive statute with the statute of, or a memorial for, the god that was they gave human sacrifice for, because it was indigenous. Because they have no knowledge of what even happened back then. I mean, they killed babies and stuff. I mean, come on.
It's terrible.
Anyway, that's another rant for another day.
That was another rant. That was good. Thank you.
The only I can go on. It's my birthday.
It is your birthday.
So I can
mention that in
rant
this
and
hour
rave
that this has been going on. It's birthday celebration here.
So we'll. But I really enjoyed the discussion, the philosophers that I remember. I think I took a semester-long course on Utopian. I thought, oh, this is really interesting when I signed up for it, and then I got into it. This is just a bunch of BS. There are a bunch of impractical idealists, and it's like, come on, man, that'll never work. It'll never work. They don't even come close. They always have these pie-in-the-sky ideas. Come on, man, as Joe Biden would say.
So I guess to summarize, study history. Actually look things up.
Yes. Read.
That's why
anything.
My favorite birthday gift over there is the first 25 or so of the Harvard Classics, which were originally published all together in 1908. It was meant to be like a sum total of like human knowledge when they're officially published. That's where I read Ben Franklin's got a bunch of Greek philosophers, a bunch of American literature, English literature, that sort of thing. You'll be so much better off if you actually plow through that. I'm trying. Yeah. I got through the first half of the first book. And there are 50 total volumes, and I have like 21 of them. So, interesting. Keep you busy for a while. No kidding. All right, well, this has been Unlimited Opinions. I've been Adam Bishop. I'm still Mark Bishop. And you can still follow us on Twitter at capital U, lowercase LMTD, capital O Opinions. Have we had any comments yet? No tweets. Oh, all right. No tweets. No tweets. For the first interesting tweet. We've passed t-shirt. Over 300 total downloads. Is that good or bad? It's not the best. That's 10 per. Well, 10 per, a little bit more, slightly more. But with all those downloads, we still have nobody tweeting at us. Nobody tweets. Well, they're a silent bunch. They're contemplative. They don't like to put themselves out there, maybe. Yeah. They don't want anybody to know that they're listening to them. That's true. That's true. We're an embarrassment. They're probably just saving it up so they can defame us later. Yeah. Mainly me. That makes sense. Yeah, there shouldn't be any guilt by association, so all the guilt comes back with me. All right.